Britain has moved into the next phase of political realignment. This was expected after the general election, but not so early on. British politics has changed in a way last seen at the turn of the 20th century. Our future is going to be repeated, though hopefully not with the same stimulus as the last time. Political parties and ideologies will fall, Britain will be redefined, the status quo is over. In 1918, the then Liberal government dealt with the aftermath of the First World War with changes it was forced to make. After 4.5 years of a bloody industrial war, the political establishment was forced to reform faster than it was ready to do so. After a policy of international belligerence that had lasted from the First Boer War to the First World War, the British establishment was faced with the social bill that came with it. Expensive overseas events in blood and money resulted in the forcing of the British government to extend the franchise and to implement proper socialist policies that culminated in the demise of the Liberal Party and the rise of the Labour Party. Liberalism, the British compromise between national pragmatism and international views on the separation of people and state, was over. Socialism had begun, and not without protests on the way. From Ireland to Scotland to the mining towns, people argued for change that was resisted until the Liberals existed no longer as an electoral force. Fast forward 110-odd years later, and the story is just the same, only with different stimuli. After 30 years of mass migration costing money and society, only this time the evidence was on our doorstep rather than in the Empire or in France. The average Joe of England is wanting change and actual reform. The Labour Party is committing all the same errors of the Liberal Party. As the Liberals imposed significant illiberal policies onto the British people during the First World War, so too is the Labour Party imposing significant anti-working class policies onto the British people. Driven by a disconnect and an ideological mission now so far removed from the interests of the British people, the party is, as was the case then, too far gone. The parallels continue as the Labour Party used the organs of the state to do all they could to suppress the desire for change, as did the Liberal Party, though Labour is using the machine of the media and its paramilitary foot soldiers rather than the army the Liberals employed in order to achieve their aims. In the end, you simply cannot stamp your foot on people in a democracy and hope to get away with it in the long term. We're in the equivalent of 1919 right now. There is visible derision, and there is an obvious spent force in the governors at record speed. The Labour Party have long abandoned their working class base, which can be seen as early as 2001, when voter turnout for that general election fell off a cliff to pretty much where 2024 was, at about 60%. Labour's long game to demolish democracy and parliamentary sovereignty in a way similar to that of cooking a frog. Slow, so the frog doesn't realise it's happening until it's too late, was in full flow by 2001, and by 2010 its job was pretty much halfway done. Its demise was well on the way. Though Labour was booted out of office, the party was rigidly committed to the maintenance of its destruction of democracy and the removal of people power in the opposition years. Its succession of leaders committed to the international movement of socialism, racial and sexual international identitarianism, and the doctrine of human rights protecting minorities from the majority. The nation's ethnic people would always come second, and the detachment from the ordinary working class man and woman carried on. Why? The answer, as is so often the case, is the Conservative Party. Again, like in 1919, the Tories simply bided their time, pretending, if not actually engaging, to reenact the same problems of the Labour Party, like they did by aping the desires of the National Liberals in 1911 to 22. The Tories rarely take the lead on fundamental change, because that is their ultimate reason for being. Only in 3 cases, Peel, Disraeli and Thatcher, did the Tories lead the call for fundamental reform, though always with a breathtaking stimulus that could not be ignored. But today the Tories are perfectly content to sit back and ape whatever the prevailing narrative of the day is in the corridors of power, far detached from the realities of the everyday. Were there to be a 1979 Thatcher moment, it would first need a 1974 Keith Joseph moment. The spiritual changer of the Tories from socialist economics to the free market within the party, it just doesn't look like this is possible. At the moment, looking at the state of the Tories, and thus, so long as the Tories don't change tack, then there's no reason for the other party to do so either. This is why the Tories have been the most successful party. They just ape the other party until the other party does the same thing worse and is then booted out of office, at which point they usually go, aha, look at the change we really wanted. And you get Stanley Baldwin in 1922, not a bad Prime Minister, but not memorable. This event today will most likely not lead to the Tories championing fundamental change. Listen to the silence from the party in the last couple of weeks. Deafening. Over the next few weeks, the Labour Party will use this and future disturbances that will look similar to French disturbances, violent protests popping up every few months, ending with a major police crackdown to further crack down on free speech, free expression and the internet. It is inevitable. Keir Starmer is a lawyer, not a politician. His go-to is the law, not persuasion. Increase the robustness of the law. Nothing fundamental will change with mass migration or illegal migration, because that is their bread and butter for their insulated supporters in suburban London. The insulated supporters who see status derived from being nice and protecting minority groups, even at the expense of democracy and the majority. The Labour MPs will quietly line up behind their leader, hoping that these authoritarian crackdowns will somehow force people to carry on voting for them so they can keep their jobs and not cause a rift from within. The Liberals in 1919 hastened their end by becoming a split party between Lloyd George's camp and Herbert Asquith's camp. Further protests will only hasten these measures. Labour will tie itself once again to the European Union as its national friends dwindle. The EU represents the social status, anti-democratic, identitarian paternalism, and as other nations reject this in favour of their own national interest, Labour will have to go back to the EU to find international legitimacy alongside international organisations like the UN and the ECHR. International law will carry on trumping domestic law, giving the UK's lawyers unimaginable power over the people in this country. However, the Labour Party has had its 1918 moment in 2024. It's still in government, though not this time in a coalition, which it should be in if you look at the distribution of the popular vote. There is no doubt in one's mind that the next election will mirror the 1922 election, where the Liberals were hammered into future oblivion. There will be barely a single Labour MP in the Red Wall and in the industrial north. There will barely be a Labour MP in Wales. And in Scotland, militant anti-Englishness will keep the SNP or an equivalent on more than life support. This doesn't mean the Tory party will stand to benefit, but a truly conservative party will re-establish itself with a far greater impetus to completely reverse the reforms of Labour from 1997. The reaction will be just as strong to the status quo in 2029 as it was in 1922, and this Labour Party will end as an electoral force, probably forever when the skeletons are paraded out. To be sure, we will see a lot of screaming on the way to this. The hold our institutions have been held in by the new aristocracy is vast and all-encompassing, but it will follow the same way as its aristocratic predecessors. Suppressed voices only become louder elsewhere, even if it has to be from abroad, as Elon Musk is showing us today. The howling will be vast as the establishment clings to the old order, as historians across the land know full well that maintenance of the old order is simply impossible. People will be arrested, news sites will be shut down, but with each measure to stop change will only make change faster. The left used to know this, now they are about to learn it themselves. Their excesses will be great because of the technology available. It will be painful for us all, but the clock is now well and truly ticking for them before their time runs out and the sands of politics will drip into the next chamber. Do not panic. The misery you see before you is just the passing of greed and bitterness, to paraphrase the almighty speech from the film The Great Dictator. People have benefited socially and financially from this fast decaying world order. The power they took from you will return to you, and when it is in your hands, once again, know very well what is to be done to make it better, because the responsibility will be once again back in your hands and out of the hands of people who think they know better. It will happen between now and 2029, so be ready. Do some reading, know your history. These riots, like ones before it in history, will pass into a distant memory. They will not find a statue or plinth for us to venerate at. We in this country abhor violence, and quite rightly too, but we will thank our lucky stars that people will know what to do when the curtain falls on this era. The pendulum will swing, and so long as we have people in power after this, with a good idea of history, they will know what mistakes not to make. So ignore the riots and the grandstanding reactions to them. They are as a result of opportunists and thugs like the riots in 2011. What lies beneath, however, is a desire to never see the news of the deaths of young girls to those who do not want to be a part of our society, or the industrial-scale grooming of hundreds of thousands of white and Sikh girls and women, or the continual heightened community tension felt all over this country. These are the symptoms of a broken system that is blind due to its ideological rigidity of multiculturalism and the denigration of a national society. Events, these are the windows into the hall of the tapestry of change. The time will come when this state of affairs will end. Just know what that time calls for. Equality of all before the law, respect of a national culture and identity, a rejection of hyperglobalization, and the desire for all to shake the hands of their neighbours in a spirit of British freedom and goodwill. This article first appeared on the TDL Times. For more information, articles and more, please visit www.thetdltimes.com.